Hello. Hello. That's like playing in your front room, isn't it? I was talking to Rob Walton, who did the Brill earlier poems, and I was saying, I don't know what to do with tonight, because I played a gig in Leeds last night, and I found myself, you know, like performing at the audience. You know, it would turn into one of those people. Just because, like, you do the same poems that you know kind of work. And by the end of my own set, I felt like Judas. So I said, I'm not going to do it anymore. I'm not going to do rhyming poems tonight. And then I decided to do a rhyming poem. But I'm being perverse enough, so it's not in the book. And it's actually it's a fairly recent one. And it's about an uncle who I had, who was the loveliest bloke. And he had a terrible stutter, like a life-impairing stutter. And the only cure for it was he was a great singer. He was an old-fashioned Jolson impersonator, and he was a quite brilliant Jolson impersonator. And when he sang, it went away. It was like magic cure. And so this is for him. It's called Uncle Keith. He had dimples for shyness and a devil of a stutter, and a smile that could melt a barrel full of butter. Uncorrupted by the nylons and the poison of the works, a half en route from backshift. Well, all jobs need the perks. And some nights when the bandbox crooked its index finger, the ties fell from his tongue and unreeled him as a singer. 3 minutes of perfection in a world that wasn't fair, caressing tears from strangers that they never knew were there. And that's how I see him now, lips not pawing at the air, but crooning down the Swanee, a portrait in prayer. Bless you. So I'm going to go really miserable now. and I thought I'd start with this one purely because I see I'm losing my vanity. I'm starting to wear my reading glasses. I can't see you lot through this either. Yeah, I subjected my better half to a miserable couple of hours at the Riverside Stadium this afternoon, and it was unrelentingly awful. We've lost the knack of passing the football to players with the same coloured shirts on, and so I thought I'd read this one from the book, which is, for any Borough fan, it's called TLF. For those who aren't initiated, it stands for the little fella, which is what we call Janino. All the joy of sunshine toasting green turf gold, Tinkerbell's toes carrying the dreams of thousands, as on weekends for just a twinkle of time, grown men became boys, grubby hands leafing comics, and the black-eyed little town suspended its heartbeat as the tiny magician went native. Men and women stared doe-eyed, if not at each other, but no one really minded, united as they were by this juggler of hopes, this fairy dust sprinkler, as we all fell in love together. So we move on to Misery from the Janino's Little Bits of Magic. I kind of snuck this into a collection, which is largely, it's very northeast based, really, Northern Lights. It's kind of, the collection is split between here, where I grew up, and where I live now, in North Tyneside. But this poem was written about Stranraer, which everybody who seems to live in, we've got friends in Stranraer, and everybody who lives there seem to have like gone there to get away from something. And Stranraer, has anyone ever been to Stranraer? It's like at the end of the world, isn't it? And everybody I know who lives there, they're lovely folk, but they kind of live there wishing they could get away. They can't sell houses, and they're all stuck there because their heart's been pulled out of the town. The ferry terminal's moved over 5 miles away, and Stranraer's fallen to bits. So I thought, well, that sounds a bit like Hartlepool. I didn't. So this is written about Stranraer, 12 World's End. Was it fate or history that tacked us fast here, in this tumble-down town at the edge of creation? You just keep running until the road has run out, and the walls have built themselves around you. Then decades strip away every ounce of otherness, until you are the bricks and the crumbling mortar. Unable to leave, yet no stomach for swimming, as the faded facades hold you tight as ice. So you sing for freedom and cry for a future that came unbidden to the staiths at world's end. I'm going to do something very politically incorrect now, and I apologise for anybody offended in advance. But after this poem, I'm going to attempt a deliberately terrible cod Spanish accent.
Is it going to be as good as your cod Irish one you do in that form?
It'll get better.
Excellent.
In the 1980s, I knew this old guy who's long dead now at his funeral, and he was called Joe Perez. Jose was his name, his real name. And he came over as a very young man over here. He fought Franco, and I got to know him a bit. He was the night watchman in the factory where I worked, in the steel factory in the borough. See, steel, there you are, Morbid. And he was a fascinating guy, and he was really well read, but he was very, very humble, and he just used to sweep the floor, and he'd get the bait cabin ready for the guys, and then he'd be night watchman again. And a really lovely guy, and I kind of, my mind went back to him. And so I wrote this for him anyway, and it's kind of all true, apart from the terrible accent. I apologise, but he did have a really thick accent. Jose Perez, summer son of Basque, accent never thinner than treacle, wedded to each bone-grinding task, master grafter, man of the people, Franco-defying mini-renegade, chewing up Lorca and starvation fags, dog-earing every juicy page, deep as a river or his face as crags. It was as if all that Spanish son of a boyhood spent working the field had powered a motor which spun and spun, light leaking through his face but his body sealed. While factory boys read their page 3s, a head shake from the dawn of taste, a cackle, a looking, lovely bodies without the mind are a fucking waste. Always travelled light did old man Joe, lived in peace and died without fuss, an unmarked plot in a quiet meadow for an educated man, one of us. So, yeah, Steelworks, just for you, Morbid. I remember when they were finally shutting the blast furnace, and everybody gathered on the beach at Redcar and kind of turned to Mecca, you know, and kind of waved a goodbye with a drink in their hands and a tear in their eye. And I just thought, I just kind of got the picture of those bastards who decided to close it down, just going, well, let them gather for one last thing and then they'll have to move on. So this is how to kill a giant. Or it mentions in the Ruin. Has anybody ever been in the Ruin pub? It shut down in the 1980s. That same steel factory we used to go in at dinner time, have a couple of pints of ale and then go back to the molten steel in the afternoon and carry on working, as you do. But yeah, it was called the Crown, and it was near North Ormsby, near the old Redpath Dom and Long things. But it was always known as the Ruin, because it used to ruin marriages, apparently. So, how to kill a giant. Slings and arrows are not what is needed. There'll be no blood let today. Rather, he must be softened over decades, brought to understand that time is a thief. Concern and moist words, shaking of heads should be the order of the day, and gentle reminders to his grieving children that he had become a relic. Downplay the fire still in his guts and the legs still striding oceans. Bring the mourners together on the beach to see the old man for one last wake. Show them the ghosts of Newport staiths. Let them drink to the Bell brothers in the shimmering frame of the Ruin. Let their tears extinguish the furnace. You kill a giant with sympathy and the sly withdrawal of his food. So yeah, put that down for the moment. I have a customer who's much older than me. She was also like my auntie, and she's 70 now, and it's remarkable. She lives. She's made a bit of money now. I think she's always been moving about and doing properties up and selling them and stuff. And her husband's just, or her partner's just retired from the rigs, so he was always going and paying for these repairs to the houses they had. And she's like an unquiet soul, really. She's had an awful time of it in her life. She lost her first husband. I remember my uncle Jimmy, her cousin Jimmy. He died in accident at work in the 1990s, early 90s. And then her daughter, 2 years later, was killed by the school bus outside of her front door. She then had a full-on breakdown. They lived in the Orkneys at the time, was in an institution, got herself well, got out of there, and then got cancer twice. And you go, gee, could anything worse happen to the woman, you know? But I'm still in touch with her, and we met her about a month ago, 2 months ago, and she's like the funniest, roughest Middlesbrough woman in the world, and just lovely. And she's had double mastectomy, which she makes jokes about and takes the pads out of her bra, and you go, oh, Jesus, gaff. And she tells ridiculously funny, harsh stories about where she used to live and stuff in Ormsby. So, yeah, it's great though, because she's just like, I don't know where you get that steel that runs through you from, you know. So anyway, and I saw, shortly afterwards, a picture of her on Facebook came up of her first marriage to Jimmy, who died, from the 60s when she was like a bottle blonde bride, like really glamorous. So I kind of wrote this from her, and it's still in ink because I've said it anyway. Shoplifter, it's called. Confettied and veiled and shy as a diamond, she's pulled into focus by the arm she is cradling. Half a century later, kicked blue by cancers, her darling long in the ground and one child light. The psychiatrists that followed made notes of the steel, her body concealed, keeping her upright. Manners are dismissed like the intruders they are, and the spit on the floor is a line. She's best friends with fuck, drinks whatever is going, sparks fags like firelighters, for she knows she has shoplifted time. So, I'm going to get soft now. I never read these in public, and I think my other half goes, it's all right, you can read them, you know, they won't laugh at you. Because I do write like softer stuff sometimes. And I thought, well, you know what it is? Fuck it, I'm going to do it anyway. So I'm going to read a couple of very short little poems that my partner lovingly made into a book. How nice is that? So is this one of them? It is. This is morbid length. It's called Drowning. Morning spent drowning in you, having surrendered my life jacket to the tides. And then Cleopatra. I'll get off soon, don't worry.
I'm just waiting to laugh at you after you finish them.
So yeah, thanks for that.
No worries, mate.
Cleopatra. Blanketed and sleep-flecked, a work-weary Cleopatra saturates in the depths of the swamps of the sofa. Lullabied by the TV's persistent hissing, the day is kissed away as she sheds its skin. Soft. Oh yeah. Do a couple more. Rosemary, page 18, and then 2 bodies. Are you still awake? Is that all right?
Never apologise.
Oh, I do it all the time, don't worry. But be confident, I don't really know. I always feel like I have to apologise when I come back to Middlesbrough. It's like I've done something wrong while I've been away. And this is a true story, but it tells itself really. Told Rosemary. Before we sprouted and grew, there was Rosemary, a ghost of a little girl lost in the concrete and bricks of an orphanage meadow. A little flower ever unpicked among the remembrance and forget-me-nots. Unloved and untended save for a childless couple desperate to harvest their lovely empty garden. Whatever the reason, the Sisters of No Mercy at Nazareth House lived up to that name and were stone steadfast. You must break contact. Too close to adopt, too loving. By some miracle of nature, the loss of Rosemary was our gain as we came along perennial, rooting in heartbreak soil. And so we grew with a missing sister, as until the day she died, a small corner of my mother's flower bed was forever rosy. It was weird, really. She was always in the background, and it was like they would talk lovely about her, and never met her, don't know what became of her either. And if you read books about Nazareth House in Middlesbrough, they're horrific. So I kind of feel for what became of her, really. So anyway, we're going to finish off with this one about getting old, really, and it was based on, we're very lucky to live in a place called Cullercoats, and we were there a couple of summers ago, looking down into the bay, and the sun was setting, and there was 2 young lads playing in the sea alone, like without a care in the world, literally. So I wrote it about them. I don't know who they were. Thank you for listening, by the way. Two boys play an evening sea at Cullercoats Bay. No notion that they are making memories to last the rest of their livelong days, and why would they? No vision of the shadows of lost wagonways, nor the artist's colony that once coloured Bank Top. No idea the middle-age spread, men with children that they will surely become, will look back on these nights with salting eyes, wondering where the years went. They see only the depths of the harboured sea, holding their forevers around them. Thank you.